For those of you unfamiliar with my work, every year I search through the contents of every issue of essentially every English-language nutrition journal in the world, so you don't have to. Of course, there's lots of important nutrition articles published in other journals, cardiology, oncology, pediatrics, internal medicine, so I also search through a number of medical subject headings every day as well. Now, anyone can do this. Let's say you like tangerines, and you want to see what's new with your favorite fruit. You can go to pubmed.gov, type in tangerine, press enter, and then click on Save Search, and you can have them email you every time a new article gets published anywhere in the world on the subject of tangerines, free of charge. And while you're waiting for your first tangerine email, you can always catch up on all the tangerine papers previously published in the medical literature, all 7,468 of them. Using my search criteria, over the last year, 12,226 articles landed in my inbox. You can usually tell just by looking at the title and abstract if they're interesting, groundbreaking, practical, the criteria I tend to use in picking which studies I'm going to cover every year. This year, I ended up downloading, categorizing, reading, and analyzing about 3,000 studies, which I turned into 365 videos, so I could post one a day, year-round, to my new website, nutritionfacts.org, thanks to the generous support of the Jesse and Julie Rash Foundation. Now, 365 videos is like 12 hours of content, so I have to split it up across multiple discs. Volumes 5 and 6 cover the first few hours of my 2011 review. This DVD you're watching now covers the next 2 hours, and I expect to release another 3 or 4 additional DVDs, and then by summer 2012 I'll have another 12,000 articles in my inbox, and we'll do it all again next year. Even though you have the DVD, I do encourage everyone to check out nutritionfacts.org. It has all the videos from all my old DVDs posted online, completely free. It's the first and only non-commercial, science-based website to provide free daily video updates on the latest in nutrition research. It has hundreds of videos on more than 1,000 topics. And new video uploaded every day. You can rate videos, share videos, search videos, discuss videos. I have links to all the sources, so you can read the original scientific papers yourself and make up your own mind. You can ask me questions. You can read my blog. You can follow the site on Twitter, follow the site on Facebook, so you can share this potentially life-changing, life-saving information with those you care about the most. The aorta is the largest artery in our body. It's like a garden hose. It comes straight off the heart, plunges down through our abdomen, and then splits off into each leg. Our hearts beat about 40 million times a year, and each heartbeat sends a wave of pressure down that hose, so it better be strong, flexible, elastic to deal with each pulse of blood pumped through it. But what if our aorta becomes stiffened with atherosclerosis, inflamed with oxidized cholesterol, clogged with fatty deposits? This is what the inner lining of our aorta should look like, all smooth, pliable, rubbery. But with too much saturated fat in one's diet, fatty streaks start to appear, which can lead to inflammation, ulceration, and calcification. The walls of our aorta can weaken, start stretching, bulging out, ballooning under all that pressure, and when balloons get too big, they can pop, and then you die. The ballooning is called an abdominal aortic aneurysm. 1 million Americans have them, but most don't even know it. They can be like ticking time bombs, getting bigger and bigger, but you don't feel it until it bursts. So the first and only symptom is usually a painful death. So that's why the current recommendation is that the highest risk group, male smokers over the age 65, get a sonogram to make sure they aren't carrying around an aneurysm in their abdomen. But more than half who get abdominal aortic aneurysms don't fall into that group. They're women or non-smokers or under 65, so there's obviously major risk factors that we're missing. Researchers launched a study of more than 3 million people, by far the largest ever, to uncover what we can do, other than just not smoking, to reduce our risk of developing an abdominal aortic aneurysm in the first place. In terms of diet, apparently the riskiest thing we can do is eat meat. Eating meat just a few times a month appears to significantly increase our risk, which makes sense. Another name for atherosclerosis is hardening of the arteries. That's what all that cholesterol goop in our arteries can do, harden and stiffen the walls of our aorta, making it less pliable. And so instead of just bouncing right back after every heartbeat, our aorta is at risk for stretching bit by bit over time until eventually we can end up with a balloon animal in our gut, and then sometimes pop goes the weasel. The most important thing, though, no smoking, which can dramatically increase our risk. Albert Einstein died of an abdominal aortic aneurysm, and he was a vegetarian. But he didn't start eating healthier until late in his life, unfortunately, and he was a heavy smoker. So, minimize both smoking and meat eating, and maximize fruit and vegetable consumption, and eat nuts every day, the two most powerful dietary behaviors found to reduce one's risk. May cut our odds of developing an abdominal aneurysm in half. Advanced glycation end products, AGEs, appropriately acronymed as they are considered gerontotoxins. Geronto as in gerontology. These are aging toxins, thought to accelerate the aging process, the multi-system decline in anatomic integrity and function. AGEs cross-link proteins together, causing tissue stiffness, oxidative stress, and inflammation. In the brain, they may contribute to dementia. In the eye, cataracts and macular degeneration. In the arteries and heart, hypertension, atherosclerosis, heart failure, and stroke. Then anemia, kidney disease, osteoporosis, and muscle loss. There are two sources of these toxins. One we can't do much about. They're produced internally as natural waste products of metabolism. But source number two is our diet. Now, research in the 70s on rats found that AGEs weren't absorbed very well, and so dietary sources were dismissed as irrelevant. Until 25 years later, when we finally tested people, and lo and behold, we found that diet-derived AGEs that are absorbed into the bloodstream may represent a major source of chemically and biologically active toxins. And so we should eliminate the foods and modes of cooking associated with the highest AGE content. Now that we know the major source of glycotoxins is our diet, the remaining question is which foods do we need to avoid? The major barrier to progress in this field has been the lack of a large reference database of these toxins in various foods, until now. For the first time ever, 549 foods tested for AGE content. They tested nuts and seeds, oils, beef, poultry, pork, fish, cheese, soy, eggs, bread, cereals, beans, grains, veggies, crackers, cookies, fruit, dairy, juice, Big Macs and Hot Pockets, hummus and veggie burgers, candy, soups, condiments, and miscellaneous, from Budweiser to breast milk, coffee and Coke, Jell-O to vodka. Here were the top 15 most contaminated foods: chicken, bacon, chicken, hot dog chicken, beef, chicken, beef, chicken, turkey, chicken, fish, beef, and chicken. Now, cooking method does matter. For example, boiled chicken is safer than baked chicken. But more important is plant versus animal. Yes, baked apples have 3 times more than raw apples, but the amounts are totally negligible. Here's a McDonald's hamburger. Here's a veggie burger fried the same way. Whereas cooking is known to drive the generation of new AGEs in foods, it's interesting to know that even uncooked animal-derived foods can contain large amounts of dietary AGEs, these so-called glycotoxins. Typical New Yorker gets about 15,000 units a day. What's a safe intake? No clue. But there are studies suggesting cutting one's intake in half may extend one's lifespan. How might one do that? Well, those Regularly consuming lower meat meals, prepared with moist heat, such as soups and stews, as part of a diet rich in plant foods, could realistically consume half. The prevalence of so-called atopic diseases, food allergies, asthma, hay fever, eczema, appear to be increasing year by year around the world, doubling, tripling, even quadrupling. Here's asthma rates over the years. Here's hospitalizations for food allergies among American children over just a few years. What's going on? Well, we had a little new insight recently. Eczema, atopic dermatitis, is a red, itchy, bumpy rash that can develop into thick, scaly, or leathery lesions. Researchers in Japan wondered if the westernization of the Japanese diet could account for the dramatic rise in incidence. In the first study of its kind, they found that higher maternal intake of meat during pregnancy was significantly associated with an increased risk of both suspected and physician-diagnosed eczema. They suggest that certain components of meat may affect the fetal immune system. They thought maybe it was the saturated fat, but that didn't pan out. Maybe it's the cooked meat carcinogens. Bottom line, they don't know what it could be about the meat. They were surprised that fish did not reduce the incidence of the disease, given the anti-inflammatory nature of the long-chain omega-3 fatty acids. They suggest maybe it's the mercury and dioxins that are accumulated in fish that might be counteracting the omega-3 advantages. So during pregnancy, cutting down on meat consumption may decrease the risk of allergic diseases. But what about after children are born? Well, a preliminary study in Poland recently of vegetarian children suggested the benefits of meat restriction may continue after birth, concluding that some elements of a vegetarian diet may promote protection against allergy. And indeed, according to the longest-running study in history comparing vegetarians to non-vegetarians, women who eat meat appear to have 30% greater chance of reporting chemical allergies, 24% more asthma, 17% more drug allergies and bee sting allergies, and 15% more hay fever, though in men, meat eaters just had a significantly greater chance of chemical and drug allergies. Now, this was cross-sectional data, meaning that this was just a slice in time, so you don't necessarily know which came first. Yes, eating vegetarian was significantly associated with fewer allergies, but maybe people suffering from allergies are more likely to start eating healthy, hoping it'll make them feel better. Still, after adjusting for other factors like smoking, the findings do suggest a favorable effect of a plant-based diet on the prevalence of allergies. You'll note in this study of 15,000 American vegetarians, not only did eating vegetarian appear to have a favorable effect on the prevalence of allergies, but several chronic diseases as well. This is what they're referring to. After controlling for factors like smoking rates, vegetarians were found to have significantly less coronary artery disease, fewer strokes, less high blood pressure, less diabetes, less diverticulosis, etc., and significantly fewer diseases overall. They also noted that the non-vegetarians were more likely to have gone in for surgery, for things as varied as varicose veins and hemorrhoids to even more hysterectomies, as well as more likely to be on medications. Those eating meat had about twice the odds of being on aspirin, sleeping pills, tranquilizers, antacids, painkillers, blood pressure medications, laxatives, and insulin. So if you don't like taking drugs, or don't like paying for drugs, we may be able to cut our odds of needing medications in half by choosing to eat vegetarian. In addition to meat, exposure to common household chemicals may exacerbate or induce allergies, asthma, and eczema. Researchers at Harvard and all around the world collected air samples from where children slept, and demonstrated for the first time that the bedroom concentration of propylene glycol and glycol ethers was significantly associated with an elevated risk of multiple allergic symptoms, runny nose, and eczema. This class of chemical compounds is found in cleaning fluids, paint, pesticides, PVC pipes, varnishes, It may be one of the reasons we've seen an increase in these kinds of diseases around the world over the last few decades. Recently, researchers put a few consumer products to the test. Air fresheners, a laundry detergent, a fabric softener, dryer sheets, each with annual sales over $100 million. 6 products, nearly 100 volatile chemicals identified, though none were listed on the labels. Usually it just says something like fragrance. And 10 of the chemicals they found are regulated as toxic or hazardous, with 3 officially classified as hazardous air pollutants. For example, the fabric softener they tested, on the label it just says biodegradable fabric softening agents. And it even smells like Mom when she leans in for a goodnight kiss. But this is what they really found, including the carcinogenic hazardous air pollutant acetaldehyde. What about if you just stick to the naturally scented products? Even products advertised as green, natural, organic emitted as many hazardous chemicals as standard ones. For example, a soap boasting pure essential oils and organic tea infusions also contained all of these. Yeah, but what if you somehow know for certain it's all just natural, like the limonene, right? That's a real phytochemical found in real citrus. Until it photooxidizes with ozone and ambient air to form dangerous secondary pollutants, including formaldehyde. When it comes to consumer products, the best smell is no smell. I've talked in the past about the biogenic amines, like spermine and cadaverine, that can be formed in decomposing tissues, but a new review on the human toxicological effects of these substances in our diet suggests that putrescine may have carcinogenic, cancer-causing effects. Putrescine is a chemical compound of decay that contributes to the smell of putrefying flesh and the fishy odor of certain vaginal infections, but it's found even in non-spoiled fish, meat, cheese, and fermented foods. Can't stay away from it, though, unless we know which foods have the most. Here's a dozen commonly eaten foods they tested: beer, blue cheese, feta cheese, kimchi, miso, sauerkraut, sardines, sausage, soy sauce, tempeh, tuna, and wine. Which do you think has the most? Sardines were runner-up, but the highest levels are found in tuna. To stay away from putrescine, we should stay away from canned fish. There's a recommendation that we should try to stick under 40 milligrams in a meal. So just a couple bites, a quarter of a serving of tuna, and we're over the limit. But it would take like 2 servings of sausages or like 10 beers to approach the limit otherwise. This new data on the antioxidant content of thousands of foods revolutionized the way my family eats. For example, you've known me as a veritable green tea fanatic, not because I particularly like it, but because that's what the science said was the best thing to drink. But that was before 283 beverages were tested. I don't think I could even name 283 beverages. They tested everything from Red Bull to crowberry liquor. Let me pull out a few. Water has 0 antioxidants, as does Red Bull. At this scale, Pepsi, Coke, and cow's milk get a 1. Glass of white wine, cup of red tea, black tea, green tea, red wine, 7 times the antioxidant power of white, but neither as good as grape juice. Here's a shot of espresso, cup of coffee, and matcha tea. Tea made out of powdered green tea leaves, which is what I've been drinking. But what is this? I mean, what beverage could possibly be better than actually eating green tea leaves? Matcha has met its match. In terms of antioxidant power, the healthiest thing to drink on the planet Earth may be hibiscus tea. So like, Red Zinger blows everything else out of the water. So here's my latest recipe: half a gallon of water, 8 cups, 4 bags of any tea in which hibiscus is the first ingredient. I like wild berry zinger, the juice of 1 lemon, and 3 tablespoons of erythritol, or you could blend in some dates. I just put it in the fridge overnight. No need to heat it. It can just cold brew. In the morning, I take out the tea bag, shake it up, and drink it throughout the day. Every day, all day long. And as always, extra credit for green foam. Pour a cup of the tea into a blender with a bunch of fresh mint leaves, blend on high, and then pour it back. So you have dark green leafies blended into what may be the highest antioxidant beverage in the world, and it tastes like fruit punch. Your kids will love it. A plant-based diet protects against chronic oxidative stress-related diseases, but which plant foods are the best? Berries are the healthiest fruits, and this study analyzed more than 100 different berries and berry products. Just to give a sense of scale, this is how many antioxidants are in America's 2 most popular fruits, bananas and apples. Now, the most popular fruit in the world is mango, which does better, but none of these are a match for the berries. Here's a cup of strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, cranberries, and blackberries. Now, that's pretty much where most of us have to leave it, unless you have access to crowberries or, dog roseberries. But getting back to what we can actually buy in a store, you'll see I keep changing the scale here on the right. What about goji berries? I'll cover those in an upcoming video on dried fruit. What about a shot of Tahitian noni juice? Doesn't even make it up to banana. And sadder than even that, a cup of green grapes, which technically are berries, but nutritionally are the wonder bread of the fruit kingdom. What about acai berries? There was actually an acai study that caught my eye last year in the Journal of Experimental Gerontology. Acai fruit pulp improves survival on a high-fat diet. I thought, how interesting, until I reread the title more closely. Acai improves the survival of flies on a high-fat diet. Why would you even want to do that? I imagine the researchers out collecting flies from some fast food dumpster or something. Unfortunately, acai wasn't tested in this study. Hopefully they'll come back next year and make it the 3,140th. In the meanwhile, I encourage everyone to eat berries every day, to always have bags of frozen berries in their freezer, whichever ones you like, but as we learned in this study, we can get more than twice the bang for our buck choosing blackberries, for example, over strawberries. Dried fruit is convenient and packed with nutrition, but which ones are the best? Here's raisins. Now, this is per serving, per ounce, not per cup like with the berries. Here's prunes, dried mangoes, which I love, so I was happy about that, dried apricots, dried cherries through the roof, with goji berries at the top. They also analyzed dried apple. Where do you think it fit? I would have guessed towards the bottom, maybe even lower than raisins, but I would have been wrong. Dried apple rings landed way up here, making them one of the healthiest dried fruits on the planet. In fact, a preliminary report was released at a recent nutrition conference suggesting that daily dried apple consumption promotes cardiovascular health in postmenopausal women. Split the women into 2 groups, and those forced to eat 3 ounces of dried apple rings a day for a year saw their bad cholesterol drop 23%. That's huge. LDL drop 23%. The level of inflammation in their bodies plummeted, and you'd think if you made people add 240 calories worth of snacks to their daily diet, they'd gain weight, but no, they actually lost a couple pounds as a bonus. Until this study was published, the most antioxidant-packed dried fruit known was goji berries, topping off the chart at 120, 5 times the antioxidant power of raisins. But then along came what? I might have guessed this new spot would belong to something like dried blueberries, but dried blueberries ended up way down here at 37. There must be something about the phytonutrients in blueberries that just does not take well to drying. Just when goji berries were getting complacent, a newly available dried fruit has pulled ahead. Dried pomegranate seeds. They are expensive, but are yummy and the healthiest snack you are likely to ever find. Now, just for trivia's sake, there are healthier, but good luck finding them. Barberries at $7.58 an ounce. Your best bet, evidently, at finding them is at Middle Eastern spice stores, where they're used to make a Persian rice dish. Let me know if you can find any, and then send me some. And then, though I know it sounds like something straight from Dr. Seuss, but I'm not making it up, dried red whortleberries. $8.97. Rarely cultivated, but you can pick your own in the Arctic tundra. Rowan berries screw up my graph again. Look how pitiful our poor goji berries are looking right about now. And finally, way off the charts, in a class of its own, top dog for healthiest snack on the planet Earth, dried Indian gooseberries. Indian gooseberries. Not to be confused with Barbados gooseberries, Cape gooseberries, Chinese gooseberries, also known as kiwi fruit, Jamaican gooseberries, Tahitian or star gooseberries. The true Indian gooseberry, also known as amla, is considered a wonderberry in the treatment and prevention of cancer, according to a recent review in the European Journal of Cancer Prevention. Arguably the most important medicinal plant in Ayurvedic medicine, and also used in traditional Chinese and Thai medicine, preclinical studies have evidently shown that amla possesses anti-fever properties, anti-pain, anti-cough, anti-artery clogging, anti-stress, heart protective, stomach protective, anti-anemia, anti-cholesterol, wound healing, anti-diarrheal, anti-artery clogging, didn't they already say that? As well as protecting the liver, kidneys, and nerves. It can also evidently be used as a snake venom neutralizer, as well as a hair tonic. It's like the kitchen sink of berry medicine. Starting 10 years ago, studies started coming out showing that amla extracts kill cancer cells in a petri dish. But lots of things kill cancer cells. You could pee in a test tube and kill cancer cells. What you want is something that kills cancer cells but leaves normal cells alone. And it wasn't until recently that this was demonstrated with amla. They tested Indian gooseberries against 6 human cancer cell lines: lung cancer, liver cancer, cervical cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and colon cancer. This is a graph of cell growth, cancer cell growth, at different amla concentrations. Here's human breast, liver, and lung cancer cells starting out, powering away at 100% growth. As you drip more amla on, the cancer cell growth rates cut in half and then stop completely, and then amla starts killing the cancer off. The growth goes negative. By the end, more than half the cancer cells are dead. Here's cervical, ovarian, and colorectal, right? Just decimated by Indian gooseberries. And here's the normal cell line, the non-cancerous cells. Right? At the highest amla levels, that which killed off more than 3/4 of the cancer cells, normal cells just seem to get their growth rates slowed down a bit. Indian gooseberries can block cancer cell growth, but tumor growth is just half the picture. You could have a tumor the size of a watermelon as long as it doesn't spread. So these researchers took human breast cancer cells and basically put them on a block of Jell-O to see if the Indian gooseberries, amla, could prevent the invasion of the cancer into the Jell-O. So here's the control: 100% invasion. The breast cancer cells just burrow right in and effectively metastasize. Here's if you infuse the Jell-O with the standard chemotherapy drug, Taxol, which I've talked about before. Cuts invasion in half. Then they use tiny doses of amla, down here in this range, where there's not even really affecting the growth much. And as you can see, the anti-invasive effect of the Indian gooseberries was almost as good as the chemo. Doctors are skeptical of the ability of plant foods to treat disease. We have no problem believing a drug like lovastatin can lower cholesterol, but red yeast rice? Come on. It has been used in Chinese herbal medicine for over 1,000 years, but what did they know back in the Tang Dynasty in the year 800? But guess what's in red yeast rice? Lovastatin, literally the exact drug. Instead of us synthesizing it in a lab, some purplish mold synthesizes it on rice, and has since forever. Now, the drug levels in the moldy rice are too variable to be reliable, so I don't recommend anyone take red yeast rice supplements. I don't recommend people take lovastatin either. I recommend eating healthy enough that you don't need either one. But it is an illustration of the power of plants, or in this case, a fungus. Doctors prescribe diabetes drugs like candy, even though some may increase the risk of heart failure, heart attacks, and death, but at the same time are skeptical that cinnamon could possibly help with blood sugar because it's just some dried bark scraped from some tree. Well, guess what Taxol is? The revolutionary chemotherapy drug that's routinely used against a half a dozen human cancers. It's some dried bark scraped from the Pacific yew tree. Now we just grow tree cells in a tank and make it that way, but originally they were just scraping thousands of trees. Still don't think plants can be powerful? This is where cocaine comes from. Morphine. This makes a glaucoma drug. Anesthesia. This shrub cures malaria. This is where aspirin comes from. Digoxin, colchicine, quinine, ipecac. This is where we get a drug to treat emphysema, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's. Periwinkle is what we use to treat childhood leukemia, even though on the bottle we call it vincristine. In the Middle Ages, they rubbed moldy bread into infected wounds. It was a staple European folk remedy. What quacks! Until a couple hundred years later, when penicillin went on to become the greatest discovery in all of medicine. Thanks to a moldy cantaloupe found in a market in Peoria, Illinois, no joke, the United States went from having just enough penicillin in 1942 to treat 10 people to 2 million doses in time for the invasion of Normandy. Over the last 25 years, about half of new drug discoveries have come from natural products. Plants can powerfully affect our health. Dripping plant extracts on cancer cells in a test tube is a far cry from testing whole foods on whole people. Another Amla study published recently, though, tried Indian gooseberries on patients with diabetes. A normal fasting blood sugar is considered under 100. Between 100 and 125 is called prediabetes, and over 25 you are essentially by definition diabetic. So they took people with diabetes and they put them on a diabetes medication, like glyburide, sold as Diabeta or Micronase. It brings down their blood sugars. Then researchers compared that leading diabetes drug to just 3/4 of a teaspoon a day of dried powdered amla. That's less than 2 berries a day worth. They just gave them a tiny bit of this fruit, and it worked even better than the leading drug. So they tried half teaspoon a day of gooseberry powder, a 1/4 teaspoon a day. Right? That's not even 1 berry. Still brought their sugars down into the normal range. Here are the potential side effects of the drug, glyburide. Most commonly, weight gain, feeling like you're going to throw up, or rarely your skin starts to fall off, or your liver fails, or poisons your bone marrow. Side effects of gooseberries? I don't know, they taste kind of sour. Amla has been used safely for centuries, but these researchers did actually find 3 dramatic side effects in addition to bringing their blood sugars down. Amla lowered their bad cholesterol, straight from the danger zone into the happy zone. 1 gooseberry a day cut their bad cholesterol in half in 3 weeks. Boosted their good cholesterol, and cut their triglycerides in half. Yeah, but how expensive is this amla stuff? How expensive are Indian gooseberries? Most of the diabetes drugs are generic now. I mean, you could get a 3-month supply of the drugs for only like $50. So I biked over to an Indian spice store I actually have in my neighborhood to see if they had amla, Indian gooseberries. I was afraid they'd be like, what? Instead, they were like, do you want frozen, dried, sweetened, salted, pickled, packed in syrup, packed in nitrogen? I bought all these in a tiny little store in a strip mall a couple blocks away from where I live. You can tell I like the sweet the best. And yes, they had powdered too. A 3-month supply? $3. Right? Am I recommending people treat their diabetes with gooseberry powder? No. I recommend curing your diabetes with a plant-based diet. I mean, why treat anything when you can get at the root cause and reverse it in the first place? Dried Indian gooseberries may be the healthiest snack on the planet, 200 times the antioxidant content of blueberries, so most antioxidants per serving, but ounce for ounce, dried herbs and spices pack on average the greatest antioxidant punch. For example, herbs and spices may max out at 10 times the antioxidant power of nuts and seeds. But look, I mean, it's easy to eat an ounce of nuts, not so easy an ounce of nutmeg. But look, some herbs and spices are so off the chart amazing that even just a small pinch can go a long way. Here's the antioxidant power of a bowl of spaghetti and marinara sauce. Let's make that whole wheat spaghetti, and maybe a few florets of steamed broccoli on top, and you have a nice 142 antioxidant unit meal. But sprinkle 1 little spoonful of dried oregano on top, and you nearly double the antioxidant power of that meal. Here's a bowl of oatmeal. Here's a bowl of oatmeal with just a ½ teaspoon of cinnamon on top, dramatically boosting the nutrition. Whenever I eat anything, I always try to think of ways I can add something to boost the nutrition in the end. Right? Can I throw in some greens or beans? Can I sprinkle herbs or spices on top? But which are the most powerful? Here's a teaspoon of oregano, one of the best, and cinnamon, but both beaten out by marjoram, right, which is in the oregano family, but more than 50% more powerful than oregano. So if instead of oregano you sprinkled, marjoram, you'd be up to here. Right? Next, allspice. Then dried lemon balm, which makes a really nice tea. I used to grow it in my garden. And speaking of tea, dried peppermint. Try sprinkling dried mint on salads, focaccia, tabbouleh. I mean, it goes good in Indian dishes. Always a good idea to have some around. And then finally, the leader of the pack, cloves. Here's that unassuming oatmeal with a ½ teaspoon of cinnamon and just a pinch of cloves. In a few minutes, you can microwave a sweet potato, mash it up with some cinnamon and cloves for a nice kind of pumpkin pie taste, and you have a cheap, simple, easy snack with more antioxidants than some people get all day long. For example, Egg McMuffin for breakfast, Big Mac for lunch, then an 8-ounce filet mignon for supper, even with a few sprigs of parsley on top. Right? Our pumpkin pie sweet potato may have the antioxidant power of nearly a week's worth of the standard American diet in one healthy snack. According to this study, by far the most comprehensive of its kind in history, there are only 3 whole foods on the planet that have more antioxidant power than cloves, and one of them is amla, dried Indian gooseberries. Now, not only is it more powerful, but also more palatable. You could add a whole teaspoon of amla to a smoothie and probably wouldn't even taste it. Try doing that with a teaspoon of powdered cloves. One sip, you'd be on the floor. Let's look at the antioxidant content of some typical American breakfast foods. Bacon and eggs, for example. A bowl of cornflakes with milk. Egg McMuffin, pancakes with maple syrup, bagel with cream cheese. Now compare those to the smoothie I had this morning. Cup of unsweetened soy milk, half a cup of frozen blueberries. Whoa, right? Already I've got to shrink the scale way down. The pulp of a nice ripe Mexican mango. Note the mango alone has more antioxidants than the other breakfasts. Right? A tablespoon of ground flax seeds, and my previous secret ingredient, a palmful of bulk white tea leaves. Just throw them in there and blend them in. Now that used to be my breakfast smoothie, but now a teaspoon of that gooseberry powder, and we're off the charts again. Right? Look at that. That's about 4 cents worth of amla, 4 pennies, and look what it does to my smoothie. 1,500 units of antioxidant power, and I haven't even fully woken up yet. Way more than the 5 other meals combined. In fact, more than the average person gets in an entire week. Right? I could drink my smoothie and eat nothing but donuts the rest of the week, and most people still wouldn't catch up. Notice, though, that even though I packed the blender with amazing stuff, blueberries, tea leaves, fully half of the antioxidant power came from that single teaspoon, that 4 cents worth of powdered gooseberries. In terms of antioxidant power, I couldn't imagine anything ever beating out cloves, but then, silly as a goose, berry comes along. But then in a whole nother league, Triphala. Triphala is the most commonly used herbal formulation in all of Ayurvedic medicine. Tri means 3, phala in Sanskrit means fruits. It's just a combination of 3 fruits: Indian gooseberries, amla, bibataki fruit, and haritaki fruit. This is not some drug, not some extract, but just 3 types of whole fruits, dried and crushed into powder. What can it do? Well, antioxidant-wise, one little pinch between your fingertips, which would cost a fraction of a penny, has as much antioxidant power as about a cup of blueberries. We're in the big leagues here. Seems to be able to do all the same amla tricks, preferentially wiping out breast cancer cells in vitro, but leaving normal breast cells relatively alone. Pancreatic cancer too. By the time this concentration of Triphala was reached, 90% of the pancreatic cancer cells were dead. As you can see, only 10% cancer cell survival. If Triphala were less toxic to normal pancreas cells, we'd expect to see something like this, and if it were completely non-toxic to normal cells, we'd expect maybe this. But what they actually found was this. It actually kind of went out of its way to protect the good cells while killing off the bad. Quoting from a review recently, all these reports suggest the effectiveness of Triphala as a non-toxic, selective anti-neoplastic, anti-cancer agent. Meaning non-toxic to normal cells at doses toxic to tumor cells. That's what we want. So what's not to like? 2011 analysis, detection of toxic heavy metals and pesticide residue in herbal plants, which are commonly used in herbal formulations. We started recognizing it as a problem about a decade ago, when the CDC started noticing cases of lead poisoning associated with Ayurvedic medications, fatal infant brain disease, paralysis, deafness. So researchers in Boston went to every Indian market within 20 miles and picked up every Ayurvedic herbal medicine product they could find. 1 in 5 contained lead, mercury, and/or arsenic. And not just a little bit. They found out that those suffering Ayurvedic lead poisoning had higher lead levels than those suffering lead paint removal poisoning. And it's not just Boston. A national survey a few years ago found that women using Ayurvedic herbs had lead levels 24% higher than non-users. As spelled out in an editorial in the Indian Journal of Medical Sciences, Ayurvedic lead poisoning is an under-recognized international problem. How do toxic heavy metals get into Ayurvedic medicines in the first place? In most cases, high levels of metals in Ayurvedic traditional herbal preparations results from intentional incorporation of certain metallic preparations, like lead oxide, mercury sulfide, arsenic trioxide. Not to worry, though, the heavy metals are claimed to be detoxified by, for example, heating and cooling the herbal mixtures in cow's urine. This is not just an India issue. Traditional medicines from around the world incorporate these poisons. In the Middle East, saut is used as a teething powder for infants. It's 51% lead, one of a number of black lead-containing substances used as teething powder. Bakur is a Middle Eastern practice of burning lead sulfides to produce pleasant fumes to calm infants. They'll be calm all right. Traditional Latin American medicines include azarcón and creta, almost pure lead used to treat constipation. In traditional Chinese herbal medicine, mercury is considered to have a tranquilizing and, if you can believe it, detoxifying effect. But wait a second, haven't these remedies been used for centuries? Sure, but that doesn't mean they're safe. In the West, let's not forget that bloodletting was among the most common medical practice performed by doctors for almost 2,000 years. If Ayurvedic herbal preparations are often contaminated with toxic metals, should we stay away from amla and triphala, two of the three most antioxidant-packed foods in the world? Are we going to be forced to go back to cloves, number 4 down the list? In the Boston study, both amla and triphala were repeatedly tested, different samples, different brands, and not a single one had any detectable lead, mercury, arsenic, or cadmium. Good news, and neither had any detectable pesticides either. But maybe that's just Boston. If you want to do a broad survey of the global market, we need to start shopping on the internet. Published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, lead, mercury, and arsenic in Ayurvedic medicines sold via the internet. Once again, 1/5 of the medicines contaminated. When the Boston study came out, there were calls for mandatory testing of all imported dietary supplements for toxic heavy metals. But this study found that the prevalence of metals in U.S.-manufactured Ayurvedic medicine was the same, if not higher, than those imported from India. They found lead levels violating safety limits in products with names like Worry-Free, a pediatric preparation, mercury in products like Breath of Life, and arsenic levels exceeding EPA limits in triphala. Mercury in triphala, and lead in triphala. OK, I guess we can scratch that off the list. That's why my smoothies have amla, not triphala. Just to put things in perspective, though, Consumer Reports recently remeasured mercury levels in canned tuna, and while a serving of triphala may have 46 micrograms of mercury, the average can of white tuna has 1,345. But as far as I'm concerned, practically any mercury is too much mercury. Closing out our exploration of this groundbreaking antioxidant analysis of thousands of foods, herbs, and spices, crowned by cloves, 100 times more antioxidants than blueberries, here for comparison's sake, then amla, then triphala, which we should probably avoid due to toxic metal contamination, and then by far the single most antioxidant-packed substance on the planet Earth, sangre de grado, blood of the dragon, a bright red sap that oozes when you slash into the bark of this Amazonian tree, leading to amusing article names such as Studies on the Anti-Diarrheal Effect of Dragon's Blood. A couple of the studies have been interesting. I'll mention them briefly just because this is really more of a medicinal than nutritive product. There was a study published in the Journal of Inflammation, hoping to get a handle on osteoarthritis, a very frustrating condition to which modern medicine has little to offer. When people get knee replacements, what do you think they do with the old knees? Well, at Case Western, they gathered them all up, all that human cartilage, to see if they could decrease the rate of cartilage loss in a test tube with a drop or two of dragon's blood. And indeed, in the context of inflammation, this cartilage starts breaking down, but you add some sap extract and you can drop that way down. Now, the study was performed by the owner of the company that, you guessed it, sells dragon blood extract, so you've got to take the findings with a grain of salt. Also, apparently effective at getting cancer cells to kill themselves. Here are 3 lines of human gastrointestinal cancer cells. Add a little bit of that red maple syrup, and you can see the cancer cells wither away as their DNA breaks up. May also prevent DNA damage in the first place. Here are corn seedlings. The control is on the left, and then a little and a lot of a mutagenic toxin, which shrivels the poor things. But you add a little sap to the roots, and the effects of the toxin are blunted. After all, a single drop of this stuff is equivalent to 3 apples worth of antioxidants. But unfortunately, there were other tests, not funded by a company that sells it, that showed in certain circumstances dragon's blood could also cause DNA mutations. So, the winner for the most antioxidant-packed, non-contaminated, non-mutagenic whole food on the planet, the dried Indian gooseberry powder. In choosing the healthiest foods, you may notice that everywhere you look, everyone seems to have a different top 10 list of the most antioxidant-rich foods, with probably dozens of competing commercial products swearing theirs is the best of the best. Some are probably just making stuff up, but genuine competing estimates arise from people citing old data, where they only test a few dozen foods or a few hundred, but other disparities arise from different labs using different tests. There are 4 in common usage: ORAC, TEAC, TRAP, and FRAP. USDA likes ORAC. These researchers used FRAP, in part because it's one of the quickest methods, which is important if you're doing 3,000 foods. Each has their pros and cons, but the problem with all of them is that they're just measuring how good a particular food is at altering a chemical oxidation reaction in a test tube. It's not done in a biological system. But for the first time ever, scientists at Cornell took 27 vegetables and measured their cellular antioxidant activity, their ability to quench free radicals within cells, by testing various vegetables on cultures of human liver cells. Sure, some phytonutrient may be a great antioxidant outside the cell, but what if it can't get inside the cell? That's where we need it. If you do the standard ORAC test, this is what you find: spinach at the top, cucumber at the bottom. No surprise, dark green leafy leads the pack. But again, this is a chemical assay measuring how these foods slow down some oxidation reaction in a test tube, and a reaction that actually doesn't even occur in nature. But hey, look, it's the best we had until now. Any guesses as to who was able to unseat spinach? Here's the cellular antioxidant activity. Cucumber still at the bottom, but now, beating everyone else, beets. Number 1, spinach isn't even in the top 10 anymore. All the cruciferous moved ahead, Brussels sprouts, broccoli, cabbage, cauliflower. And hey, look, between the beets and the red bell pepper, it looks like the greens got beat out by the reds. Should we really try to go out of our way to make higher antioxidant choices? Isn't it enough just to eat lots of fruits and vegetables? Does it really matter which ones we eat? Yes, it does. Check out this new study. They took 24 folks, had them eat a high antioxidant diet and a low antioxidant diet, but here's the catch. Throughout, they ate the same number of fruits and vegetables, same amount of fiber, etc. So while on the high antioxidant diet, they were eating berries and citrus, and on the low antioxidant diet, they had to stick to wimpier choices like lettuce and bananas, but same amount. This is what happened to the level of inflammation within their bodies. Those switching from their regular diet to an even lower antioxidant diet saw the levels of C-reactive protein in their bodies rise 40%, whereas those switching to the high antioxidant diet saw their levels drop even though both groups were eating the same number of servings of fruits and vegetables every day. So quality counts, not just quantity. Our understanding of nitric oxide has come a long way since it was named Molecule of the Year in 1992, and won some folks a Nobel Prize in '98. It is a key biological messenger within the body, and its message is open sesame. It's released by the lining of our arteries to tell the muscle fibers within the walls of our arteries to relax, so our arteries open up and let the blood flow. That's why when people are having a heart attack, they're given nitroglycerin, which our body converts to nitric oxide, to open up our arteries. In fact, that's how Viagra works. It boosts nitric oxide signaling, which leads to dilation of the penile arteries. The ED we really need to be concerned about, though, is endothelial dysfunction. Dysfunction of the lining of all our arteries, considered a first step towards atherosclerosis, our leading cause of death. Here's what happens. NO, nitric oxide, is produced by an enzyme called NO synthase. If you have a lot of free radicals in your body, though, they come in and not only gobble up the NO, they hijack this enzyme. They hijack NO synthase, take it over, and have it instead start making more free radicals. So our arteries become dysfunctional, they don't relax when they should, and that can contribute to the hardening of our arteries. If, however, we flood our body with antioxidants by eating healthy foods, it should quench those free radicals and let NO get back to its job. So recently, for the first time ever, researchers studied the effects of eating high antioxidant foods on NO activity. We saw what choosing higher antioxidant plant foods did to inflammation. What effect does it have on our arterial function? You can hook people up to a device that measures the dilation of their arteries and blood flow through ultrasound. In the study, people started eating their normal, miserable diet, then switched to an even more miserable diet, and their arterial dilation capacity dropped, though not significantly. They started out eating a pretty crappy diet to begin with, which they then let people get back to, and so their NO activity came back to baseline. Then they had these people eat the higher antioxidant foods like berries, and within a period of just 2 weeks, a significant jump in their arteries' ability to relax and dilate normally. This is where they should have been in the first place, or even higher. Right? This study suggests that choosing antioxidant-rich plant foods can improve blood flow to all parts of our bodies. The relationship between stool size and decreased cancer risk at first seems pretty straightforward. Fiber is what causes bulky stools. The only place fiber is found is in whole foods, so isn't that just saying more plant foods, less disease? That's no revelation. But consider this. Even plant-derived foods without fiber seem to increase fecal weight. How could that be? That same group of intrepid Italian researchers that did the inflammation and arterial function studies turned their sights to the ability of a high total antioxidant capacity diet to increase stool weight and bowel antioxidant status in human subjects. Just like in the previous studies they did, same diets in terms of amount of fiber and amount of fruits and vegetables, but the high antioxidant group just substituted some of the higher antioxidant foods, like swapping in berries for bananas. After 2 weeks on the low antioxidant diet, their average stool weight dropped down to 3 ounces a day. That's almost as bad as New Yorkers. But after switching to the high antioxidant diet, remember, same amount of fiber, there was more than a doubling of stool size. They suspect it has something to do with healthier diets altering the gut flora, but now we know. In addition to all the other benefits, a diet selected to raise the intake of dietary antioxidants is able to increase stool bulk. And incidentally, the antioxidant content of feces, though I'm not sure why we care. Remember the Atkins diet? I wrote a book about it a few years ago. The Atkins Corporation threatened to sue me, but I kind of won by default because they declared bankruptcy 6 months later. You can read the whole book in my rather amusing back and forth with Atkins lawyers at atkinsexposed.org. Here's an illustrative case report of what can happen when you go on such a diet, reported recently in the Journal of the American Dietetic Association. Development of symptomatic cardiovascular disease after self-reported adherence to the Atkins diet. Started out healthy, 51-year-old man, pretty good cholesterol, no chest pain, and a working penis. He was gaining a few pounds, though, so he decided to go on a low-carb diet. 1 month in, his cholesterol shot through the roof, but hey, he lost 5 pounds, so he kept it up. And after 2 years, more on the diet, he lost 3 pounds, but he also lost the ability to have an erection, and he started having chest pains. But hey, that's what drugs are for, so he started taking Viagra, the wonders of modern medicine, which also came in handy when he landed in the emergency room with crushing chest pain. He got a cardiac catheterization, which found a 99% blockage of one of his coronary arteries, supplying blood to his heart. Luckily, they found it in time. He got a drug-eluting stent placed, was eventually discharged from the hospital, and finally decided, maybe this Atkins thing isn't such a great idea, so switched to a low-fat diet with whole grains, beans, vegetables, nuts, and even, gasp, the inclusion of vegetarian entrees. 2 months on the new diet, his weight was down, his cholesterol was down, and he stopped taking the Viagra. Now, a skeptic might suggest that he had clogged arteries before he even started the low-carb diet. But no, he actually got a coronary artery scan right before starting on Atkins, and there was no measurable plaque in his coronary arteries. And then just 29 months later, after the initiation of the low-carb diet, 99% blockage. Now, they were able to open that surgically with a stent, but it took his changing to a more healthy diet to open up blood flow to other parts of his body. This was a pretty dramatic case report, but it was just one person. Recently, researchers at Harvard decided to look at 100,000 people, low-carb diets, and all-cause and cause-specific mortality. They found that low-carb diets were associated with higher all-cause mortality, higher cardiovascular disease mortality, and higher cancer mortality, the final nail in Atkins' coffin. Men and women on low-carb diets live significantly shorter lives, more cancer deaths, more heart attacks. Sure, you may lose some weight, but the only way we may be able to enjoy it is with a skinnier casket. But wait. In 2009, some enterprising researchers came up with a plant-based low-carb diet, the so-called Eco-Atkins diet. They figured that maybe the problem with the Atkins diet wasn't that it was high-fat, high-protein, but that it was high animal fat, animal protein. So they constructed like a vegan version of the Atkins diet. Now, how is that possible? Well, lots of mock meat, seitan, soy burgers, veggie bacon, veggie cold cuts, veggie sausage, tofu, lots of nuts, avocado, etc. How did they do? Pretty good, actually. Instead of their bad cholesterol going up, like it does on a meat-based Atkins, after just 2 weeks on the plant-based low-carb diet, their LDL was down more than 20%. Now, the whole study only lasted a month, though, so you couldn't really make any generalizations, but it was intriguing enough that when the data was run at Harvard, they picked out the people eating plant-based low-carb diets to see if they suffered the same low-carb fate. That's the nice thing about doing dietary studies on 100,000 people at a time. You can find people eating just about anything. What do you think they found? This line represents the mortality rate of the typical diet. And this is what they found for people following more of an Atkins-style low-carb diet, significantly higher risk of death. But what do you think they found for those following a plant-based low-carb diet? Did they suffer the same crazy mortality as the Atkins people? Or maybe they didn't do that bad, but still had more mortality than those eating regular diets? Or did they have the same or lower mortality? They had lower mortality. They concluded, A low-carbohydrate diet based on animal sources was associated with higher all-cause mortality in both men and women, whereas a vegetable-based low-carbohydrate diet was associated with lower all-cause and cardiovascular disease mortality rates. So it appears what matters really isn't the ratio of fat to carbs to protein, but rather the source, whether they're coming from plants or animals. How much B12 do we need? Well, the recommended dietary allowance is 2.4 micrograms, 2.4 millionths of a gram every day. That number, I was surprised to learn, was based on a study of just 7 people performed so long ago that 4 were described as capital N Negroes. Both society and science has moved on a bit since then, and the new numbers were recently published, and it appears 4 to 7 is the new 2.4. How did they come up with that? Well, 2 reactions B12 facilitates are the metabolism of methylmalonic acid and homocysteine. And so if we're B12 deficient, these 2 compounds can build up in our bloodstream because there is enough B12 to run these reactions. So low levels of MMA and homocysteine can be a sign of good B12 status. And as you can see, 2.4 micrograms is good in terms of lowering methylmalonic acid levels and homocysteine, but 4 appears to be better. These biomarkers of functional B12 status hadn't even been discovered when quote-unquote Negroes walked the earth, and once you hit 7 a day, you basically max out, so there's no need to get more, though there appears to be no danger in doing so. You just pee the excess out. So that's where they got the new 4 to 7 a day recommendation, though as we'll see, we may need to take much more than that to absorb that amount. What's the best way to get vitamin B12? Well, B12 is not made by plants, not made by animals either. It's made by certain bacteria, some of which line the guts of animals, of which people eat and drink, but that's not the best source because of the baggage that comes along with it. Just like we can't get the iron in beef without the saturated fat, the protein in pork without lard, the calcium in dairy without hormones, we can't get the B12 in animals without also consuming stuff we don't want, like cholesterol. For example, to get 4 to 7 micrograms of B12 from eggs, because the absorption is so low, we'd have to literally eat hundreds of scrambled eggs a day, 200 to 400 eggs a day. You know how much cholesterol that would be? If you got all your B12 from scrambled eggs, you'd consume 69,000 milligrams of cholesterol, practically your entire year's worth every day. So yes, chickens harbor bacteria. The bacteria make B12. Some of that B12 makes it into the chicken and then into the egg, but so does the cholesterol. There has to be a better way. Why don't the bacteria in our colon make B12? They do, actually. It's just too far downstream to be absorbed. In one of the less appetizing but more brilliant experiments in the field, a Dr. Collender delineated that human colon bacteria make large amounts of B12. Although the B12 is not absorbed through the colon, it is active. How do we know? She found some vegan volunteers with B12 deficiency, collected their stools for 24 hours, and then, you guessed it, bon appetit. And it worked. They were cured. Those are some hardcore vegans. There has to be a better way, and thankfully there is. Fortified foods and supplements. Not only the safest, but also the most effective. In the U.S. Framingham Offspring Study, 1 in 6 meat-eaters between ages 26 to 83 were B12 deficient. The folks with the highest B12 levels weren't the ones eating the most animal products, but the ones taking supplements and eating the most fortified breakfast cereal. The cheapest way to get our B12 is probably one 2,500 microgram sublingual, chewable, or liquid supplement of cyanocobalamin once a week. This stuff is dirt cheap. You can find a 20-year supply online for $40. All the B12 our body needs for $2 a year. Of course, the stuff doesn't last 20 years. There's a 4-year expiration date, so share it with some friends. For those mathematically minded who are thinking, wait a second, if you only need 4 to 7 micrograms a day, why do you have to take 2,500 a week? Well, it's a little complicated, but let's do it. Our B12 receptors become saturated at as little as 1.5, so we can only absorb 1.5 at a time through our receptor system. But about 1% of the rest passively diffuses right through our gut into our bloodstream. So for those of you into this kind of thing, let's do the math. When we take a 2,500 microgram dose, we absorb 1.5 through our receptor system, and then 1% of the 2,498.5 that's left. So inside our body, we now have 1.5 plus that 1% comes out to be about 26.5. You do that once a week, and that averages to about 4 micrograms a day. So we should take at least 2,500 micrograms once a week. We could take 3,000 a week, 5,000. If you take too much, all you get is expensive pee, and at a couple bucks a year, it's not even that expensive. Even though it is a water-soluble vitamin, we don't have to take it every day, because throughout our evolution, our bodies were so used to getting such tiny amounts, maybe some woolly mammoth pooped upstream or something, that our body devised an ingenious way to hold on to it. So that's why we can do this kind of averaging over time. Though it may be easier and cheaper to just take something once a week, some people would rather get into the habit of doing something daily so they don't forget. So how much would you have to take if you wanted to take vitamin B12 once a day rather than once a week? Using the formula we just learned, 1.5 plus 0.01 times the quantity of x minus 1.5 equals 4 to 7, solve for x. All weight, once a day, 250 micrograms or more is all we need. You can put it next to your toothbrush to remind yourself, whatever it takes. The reason we can't absorb more than about 1.5 at a time directly through our receptors is that they get filled up, but it only takes them about 4 to 6 hours to unload their cargo into the body and are back in business. So if we got B12 3 times a day, like breakfast, lunch, and dinner, we could absorb 1.5 each time and end up with 4.5 at the end of the day, which is all we need. And these kind of doses we can get from fortified foods. The so-called daily value on nutrition facts labels for B12 is 6 micrograms. So as long as each serving provides 25% of our daily value, then we can eat a serving of B12 fortified foods at every meal, and we wouldn't have to take supplements at all. So, for example, there's vitamin B12 fortified nutritional yeast. A half teaspoon counts as a serving, so you could sprinkle that on your meals, but that'd be like $1 a week, as opposed to just a few pennies a week for B12 supplements. But whichever path you choose, and there's lots of various fortified B12 fortified foods out there, these are not just recommendations for people eating plant-based diets. They're recommendations for anyone who wants a cholesterol-free source of vitamin B12. Should people who eat plant-based diets be tested for vitamin B12 deficiency? In my opinion, medical tests should only be ordered if the results, one way or the other, are going to change what you do. If your test came back showing your B12 levels were low, what would you do? You'd ensure a regular, reliable source of vitamin B12. If your test came back showing your levels were okay, what would you do? You'd ensure a regular, reliable source of B12 because you wouldn't want them to become not okay. So if it's not going to matter either way, I wouldn't worry about it, with 2 exceptions. I recommend anyone with unexplained neurological, psychiatric, or developmental symptoms be tested, especially in infants, toddlers, vegans, and anyone over 50. And out of an abundance of caution, I've always tested all my pregnant and breastfeeding vegan patients, just because the consequences of deficiency are so potentially devastating. Better than getting a serum B12 level drawn, though, which most doctors do, a methylmalonic acid level is a superior test for B12 deficiency, which can be blood or urine. You can just pee in a cup for it. Here's why measuring MMA levels is better. About 50 people started eating vegan. Within a few years, half became B12 deficient, but look at their B12 levels. All these vegans had functional B12 deficiency, despite normal levels of B12 in their blood. showing that MMA is a more effective test. Now, there has been a case report published of someone with apparent B12 deficiency who had normal B12 and MMA levels, so we're always looking for a better test, and it looks like HOLO-TC is it, measuring holotranscobalamin levels, shown to be more sensitive and specific, meaning fewer false negatives and false positives. If your level's under 20, you start treatment. If it's over 30, you can be pretty sure you're OK, and if it's in the middle, you follow up with a second-line test. If you are deficient, you can be treated with a ruby-red, mad scientist-looking injection of B12. The color is from the cobalt in the molecule. But one of medicine's best-kept secrets is the efficacious use of high-dose oral B12. Safer, cheaper. 2,000 microgram supplements every day for 2 weeks should do it, before having patients starting or resuming their regular, reliable regimen of B12. For over a decade, soy foods have enjoyed the rare privilege of an FDA-approved food label health claim about soy's ability to protect against heart disease. Now a billion-dollar industry, they have a lot of money to fund research touting the benefits of their bean. And although there is also a U.S. Dry Bean Council representing all the other beans, I think you can get a sense just by comparing their websites who may have more money to spread around. So though you may not soon see ads on TV with anyone exclaiming they are gonzo for garbanzos, there was a study out of Tulane recently that looked at the cholesterol-lowering power of non-soy legumes. There are all sorts of beans out there. Which did better to lower the number one risk factor, LDL cholesterol, of our number one killer, heart disease? Soybeans or non-soybeans? Soy consumption drops bad cholesterol on average about 4 points. Other beans, lentil, lima, navy, pinto, etc., drop bad cholesterol 8. Though it's illegal for, say, a baked bean manufacturer to make health claims on their label, soy isn't special in that regard. All beans are beautiful, and in this case beat out soy 2-to-1. Are you ready for a wild ride? One of the fundamental gospels of sports physiology just got turned on its head. Every exercise physiology textbook in the world just got thrown out the window, and all because of beet juice. When athletes train, the reason they get better is they improve oxygen delivery to their muscles. Changes in their lungs allow them to take bigger breaths, for example. Strengthening of the heart boosts cardiac output and blood flow. Your body may even start making more red blood cells to boost the oxygen-carrying capacity of the blood. But the energy ultimately derived from that oxygen remains the same. X amount of oxygen gets you X amount of work, period, no matter who you are. As an analogy, on the same gasoline, a Lamborghini goes faster than some lemon, but not because the chemistry of gasoline combustion is different in the sports car, it's just a more powerful engine. Similarly, we may have bigger muscles, we may be able to get more oxygen to those muscles quicker, but the fundamental energy that can be extracted from oxygen remains the same. Or so we thought. Researchers put 8 guys on bikes and measured their oxygen consumption before and after a few days sipping 2 cups of beet juice. Before this series of experiments, there was no known drug, substance, steroid, intervention, nothing that could actually increase energy extraction from oxygen, yet this is what they found. The open ovals are the placebo, and the filled are the beetroot group. After a couple cups of beet juice, they could do the exact same amount of work with less oxygen. Same work with 19% less oxygen. Then when they ramped up the bike for an intense bout of what they called severe cycling, time to exhaustion was extended from 9 minutes 43 seconds to 11 minutes 15. Greater endurance with less oxygen in the beet group. 16% improvement in their time, with only about 4/5 the oxygen requirement. In short, the beet juice made their body's energy production significantly more efficient. What could possibly be in beet juice to so revolutionize the field of sports physiology. First, a quick biochemistry breather. Our body uses oxygen to create ATP, the energy currency of our bodies. Every time we think, every time we blink, every time we flex a muscle, we use up ATP, which has to be replenished by breathing more oxygen, or we die. The enzyme that makes ATP, ATP synthase, deep inside our cells, is literally a microscopic rotary mechanical motor. Oxygen causes the flow of protons, and like a water wheel in that flow, the enzyme turns and makes ATP. Like any motor, it's not perfectly efficient. There's some slippage of the gears, there's proton leakage out the edges, but it's an extraordinary mechanism. OK, so where do beets come in? Well, beets offer one of the most concentrated sources of dietary nitrate, which is absorbed in our stomach and then actively concentrated and pumped back into our mouth through our salivary glands, because our body knows that there are special commensal bacteria that live on our tongue. Our tongue bacteria take these nitrates and convert them into nitrites, which are then reswallowed, absorbed again, and then make their way to our cells, and then converted into a third compound, nitric oxide, which then acts on the proton pump to either reduce the slippage, or plug up the leaks, or even take the place of oxygen in the whole contraption. We're still not sure, but this is why they think beets are able to reduce the oxygen cost of exercise while improving athletic performance. How do they know it's the nitrate that's responsible for the beet-related boost in athletic performance? Beets have all sorts of wonderful phytonutrients. Well, first they compared beet juice to a berry juice, packed with phytonutrients, but no nitrate. Beets worked, berries didn't. Yeah, but still I'm sure there's lots of stuff unique to beets other than the nitrate. So they got creative. If it truly is this unbelievable nitrate to nitrite double pass through the mouth, what would happen if you had them swish with an antiseptic mouthwash? Wipe out that integral population of tongue bacteria. They tried it. Nitrite levels dropped, presumably eliminating the performance-enhancing effect. They even had guys drink the beet juice and then drool for 3 hours, not swallow any of their saliva, and that eliminated the beetroot effect too. The effect of beetroot juice on the plasma concentration of nitrite, and the effects of spitting versus swallowing. I told you this was a crazy story. They drank the same amount of beet juice, but by drinking and drooling, they removed that critical second pass through the mouth. So, don't waste your money buying beets to boost your athletic performance, unless you keep your tongue bacteria happy and swallow your spit. The scientific world could simply not believe that beets could significantly, noticeably improve athletic performance by enhancing energy production at the subcellular level. So the same type of study was repeated over and over and over in different labs. Forget the labs, what about out on the racetrack? Chugged 2 cups of beet juice and off they went. Randomized, double-blind, crossover, placebo-controlled study. Nobody knew who was drinking what going into it. Beet juice versus denitrated beet juice. And the most striking finding was a significant improvement in 4 and 16K competitive cycling time trial performance after the ingestion of a single half-liter beetroot beverage, with all 9 individuals completing both distances faster after beetroot supplementation. And once the researchers were actually able to take muscle biopsies from people before and after, and finally provide proof that mitochondrial efficiency, human energy production, could be improved, they finally won over the scientific establishment. A toast to health and performance. The media echoed the praise, complete with even more atrocious puns. I just presented evidence from this groundbreaking new series of experiments suggesting beets can significantly improve athletic performance. Can't be that easy. There has to be some downside. Well, Those who want their kids to get a jump on physical fitness should know that the American Academy of Pediatrics recommends we not feed vegetables to infants under 3 months of age, but of course we shouldn't be feeding babies anything but breast milk at that age. What else? Beets do have a lot of oxalates in them, and though the primary means of preventing oxalate kidney stone formation involves meat restriction and eating more fruits and vegetables, some people are genetically predisposed to oxalate absorption, in which case they might want to instead choose a different high-nitrate plant food to boost their performance. Other than that theoretical concern, only 2 side effects were consistently noted in these studies. No deleterious side effects, but subjects did, however, report beeturia, red urine, and red stools. That's actually the real name, beeturia, the passage of pink or red urine after the ingestion of beetroot. And it doesn't happen in everybody, which is kind of interesting. Same thing with asparagus. Only about half the population gets stinky pee from asparagus, whereas the frequency appears greater among Americans for some reason. Those who produce the odor assume politely that everyone does, and those who do not produce it have no idea of the olfactory consequences of asparagus. There is no reason as to why these 2 opposing factions should converse on this subject. It just wouldn't come up in conversation, but a brief discourse with one's colleagues will confirm such differences and verify this state of affairs. It actually gets curiouser and curiouser. There are not just 2 types of people in the world when it comes to asparagus pee, but 4. Some people get stinky pee, but apparently genetically don't have the ability to smell the smelly compounds themselves. Some people are excretors of stinky asparagus pee, while others are non-excretors. However, others are perceivers, able to smell the odor, while others can't. So some people think they don't have stinky pee, but in actuality it's just not stinky to them. You've got to love nutritional science. Beeturia. Pink pee after beet consumption is totally harmless. You're just peeing out some of the pigment, but it can be used to remind us of an important fact. When we eat plant foods, many of these wonderful antioxidant pigments, lycopene, beta-carotene, phytonutrients, are actually absorbed into our bloodstream and bathe the organs, tissues, and cells of our bodies. There's no direct connection between our gut and our bladder. Right? The only way these beet pigments are finding their way into our urine is by being absorbed through our gut into our bloodstream, and then circulating throughout our entire body before eventually being filtered out by the kidneys. Right? Our blood for a time is a little pinker too. When we have garlic breath, it's not just garlic residue in our mouths, it's the fact that those wonderful health-promoting garlic compounds got absorbed into our bloodstream and are actually being excreted straight out of our lungs. Right? If we just had a garlic enema, we'd still get garlic breath. So when you see studies investigating the antibacterial effects of garlic, and you're thinking, who cares what garlic does in a petri dish, right, outside the body? Right? That's why we care, because it does circulate throughout our body. That's why garlic has been found useful as an adjunct treatment for pneumonia in critical cases. Right? It's excreted from our lungs to get that garlic breath and can wipe out bacteria on the way out. Other than pink pee and red stools, which gives a whole new meaning to the term toilet bowl flushing, any other side effects to beet consumption? One more. Should you get run over while you're out biking on beets, on autopsy you might amuse your pathologist. The case of the purple colon. Purple discoloration of the large bowel related to beetroot ingestion. Those of you paying close attention to this discussion of how beets can boost athletic performance may have noticed a term that sounded familiar, nitric oxide, which I talked about before in The Power of NO. It's a vasodilator, helps open up blood flow. That's how those nitroglycerin pills work when someone's having angina. So if that's how beets work, no wonder it lowers blood pressure as well. Increasing athletic performance is nice and all, but if high-nitrate vegetables can do that, then these novel findings may have several clinical implications. A dietary therapy that lowers blood pressure and increases exercise tolerance may obviate the use of expensive drugs with potentially deleterious side effects. Look at this. Drink some beet juice, and look what happens to your blood pressure within hours, and still working a day later. We've known that fruits and vegetables reduce heart disease risk, particularly dark green leafy vegetables. We just haven't exactly been sure why. These findings suggest that dietary nitrate underlies the beneficial effects of a vegetable-rich diet, and highlights the potential of a natural, low-cost approach for the treatment of cardiovascular disease. That's why this prescription was published in an American Heart Association journal. 2 cups of beet juice is a lot of nitrate, though. Although the magnitude of the improvement in performance after consumption of the natural vegetable juice beverage might seem surprising, it's important to note that the acute dose of nitrate used in the present study, a half liter, is 4 to 12 times greater than the typical daily dietary nitrate intake in the United States. Yeah, but if it's found in vegetables, how much is that really saying? Therefore, the researchers conclude, we advocate consumption of a diet high in nitrate, a natural strategy to treat hypertension, high blood pressure, prehypertension, and to protect individuals at risk of adverse vascular events, like heart attacks. So if you want to try this at home, either to boost your athletic performance or protect yourself from cardiovascular disease, which foods are the best sources? What do you think? Is it beans, bulb vegetables like garlic and onions, fruiting vegetables like eggplant, squash, tomatoes, green leafies, mushrooms, root vegetables like carrots, beets, potatoes, or stem vegetables like asparagus and celery? Well, in milligrams per 100 gram serving, greens win the day. Here are the top 10 widely available sources. And with all this talk about beet juice, you'd think beets might be number 1, but they just barely made the top 10 list. Swiss chard has more. Next comes oak leaf lettuce, then beet greens, basil, spring greens like mesclun mix, butterleaf lettuce, cilantro, rhubarb, and arugula, also known as rocket lettuce. Now, beet juice would actually be here, but we always want to choose whole foods to maximize the nutrition. As you can see, there's actually one stem vegetable, came in number 2 even, rhubarb, but 8 out of the top 10 are green leafies, with the winner by a large margin being arugula, 18 times more nitrate than kale. I may have a new favorite vegetable. 10 years ago, a pair of twin Harvard studies found the more fruits and vegetables you eat, the lower your risk of heart disease. The most powerful protector? Green leafy vegetables, and now perhaps we know why. Nitrites. Harmful, harmless, or helpful? Nitrites are preservatives added to cured meats like bacon, ham, and hot dogs to prevent botulism and make them pink by combining with iron in the blood. Everybody knows nitrites are bad for you, right? But wait a second, didn't I just show all this research suggesting that, in fact, the reason dark green leafy vegetables may be so healthy is that the nitrates in them turn into nitrites in our mouths, and the nitrites go on to produce nitric acid, which is so great for our arteries. So which is it? Are nitrates good for you or bad for you? If nitrites are good for you, then hey, pass the bacon. Right? If nitrites, however, are bad for you, then shouldn't we stay the heck away from spinach? On one hand, we have the food group widely considered to be the worst possible thing you can eat, processed meat. On the other hand, we have dark green leafy vegetables considered the best, yet they are respectively being trashed and touted for the exact same reason, nitrites. It's got to be one or the other, right? Now things are starting to get interesting. Our story begins on a Norwegian fur farm in 1957. Mink were dropping dead left and right from a malignant new liver disease. The clue came when livestock started dying from liver cancer as well. What tied all the cases together was the use of fish meal in their diets, fish meal that the country had just started preserving with sodium nitrite. Subsequent research discovered nitrite, under certain circumstances, can form nitrosamines, which directly attack DNA, or universally condemned as one of the key carcinogens in cigarette smoke. The occurrence in food was raised as a matter of gravest concern nearly a half-century ago. Now we know the nitrites added to processed meats can form these carcinogenic nitrosamines, now recognized as among the most potent chemical carcinogens. For example, pregnant women who eat hot dogs risk having children with brain tumors, the number 2 pediatric cancer. Then children who eat lots of hot dogs have nearly 10 times the odds of developing childhood leukemia, the number 1 pediatric cancer. Last year in Meat Science, an article about the role of ham in a healthy diet breathed a sigh of relief. Aspects related to health and well-being are increasingly important factors in consumer decisions, although the great palatability of ham largely outweighs such considerations. There are literally hundreds of studies on the link between cancer and cured meats, like bologna, bacon, ham, and hot dogs. But just for a taste, just over the last year or so, processed meat consumption was significantly associated with bladder cancer, endometrial cancer, prostate cancer, thyroid cancer, then all the way down the digestive tract, throat cancer, esophageal cancer, more esophageal cancer, and stomach cancer, colon cancer, and rectal cancer. And then for a 10-for-1 deal, processed meat was significantly related to the risk of stomach, colon, rectal, pancreatic, lung, prostate, testicular, kidney, more bladder cancer, and leukemia as well. That's why the official recommendation is to try to avoid processed meats entirely. With concern over the potential danger of nitrosamines growing, consumer groups such as the Center for Science and the Public Interest, a wonderful group, petitioned the USDA as far back as 1972 to ban, or at least greatly reduce, the nitrite in cured meats. The USDA denied the petition, citing nitrite's role in the prevention of botulism bacteria that can grow inside vacuum-packed meats. They had to weigh the risk of cancer with the risk of consumers getting a deadly food-poisoning bacteria from lunch meat. In 2011, the National Pork Board officially changed their quarter-century-old slogan from "Pork, the other white meat" to "Pork, be inspired." Maybe for bacon, they should have considered the tagline, "Cancer or botulism, take your pick." We know cured meat increases cancer risk, childhood leukemia for example, yet higher intake of vegetables is associated with a reduced risk. How can nitrites be bad in meat, but good when they originate in our own mouth from all the nitrates we get from green leafy vegetables? Well, one possibility could be that nitrates are not good, and such a case has been made, blaming the rise of Alzheimer's, diabetes, Parkinson's, and the kitchen sink on not only the rise in fast food and processed meat, but also the use of nitrate-containing fertilizers on our crops. Now, this was dismissed as an unsupportable conclusion, but by the vice president of the Fertilizer Institute. So how do we know it's just not a load of bull? And speaking of manure, organic producers in fact brag that their vegetables are significantly lower in nitrates. So nitrates in plants, is it just a matter of too much of a good thing? Are nitrates in foods harmful or healthy? Before our heads explode, let's go back to the basics. The facts of the case. The nitrosamines are the carcinogens, not the nitrites themselves. The nitrosamines are what cause the cancers. The only reason we're concerned about nitrites is that under certain circumstances they can turn into nitrosamines and other N-nitroso compounds. And the only reason we're worried about the nitrates is that they form nitrites, which again, under certain circumstances, can form nitrosamines. The nitrites themselves are fine, in fact, amazing. That's what all the new beats and blood pressure evidence I showed points to. And the nitrates turn into nitrites, which turn into nitric oxide, which helps our arteries and athletic performance. So as long as nitrites turn into NO, we're good. It's only when they turn into nitrosamines that they cause trouble. So the answer to the riddle, finally, lies in the circumstances in which nitrites form nitrosamines, and that circumstance is in the absence of plants. Phytonutrients like caffeic acid, found in all plants, blocks nitrosamine formation, ferulic acid, ascorbic acid, vitamin C, and others. So nitrates plus plant foods, no problem. But is there any vitamin C in meat? No. So you add nitrites to meat, and nitrosamines preform in the meat before it even makes it into our mouths. It's not so much that we're eating the nitrites added to the meat, but eating the nitrosamines that form in the meat when they add nitrites to it. Nitrites, in the absence of plants, turn into carcinogenic nitrosamines. Nitrosamines are considered the most carcinogenic, the most cancer-causing agents in cigarette smoke. In 2011, scientists measured the amount of nitrosamines in meat products. This is a table showing quantities of 7 different preformed carcinogenic nitrosamines. So from chicken meatballs to pork, turkey slices, hot dogs, foie gras, and sausage, processed meats come prepackaged with carcinogens thanks to the transformation that occurs from nitrite to nitrosamine in the absence of phytonutrients. How much is there in meat compared to tobacco? The Cancer Project uses this graphic to warn consumers about the cancer risks associated with processed meat, which kind of suggests a few hot dogs may contain the carcinogenic load of a pack of cigarettes. Turns out they hit it right on the head. Filtered cigarettes have 11 times more nitrosamines and nitrosamides, but that's per kilo. Cigarettes have less than a gram of tobacco each. Hot dogs are about 60 times heavier, and so 4 hot dogs has more than a pack of 20 cigarettes. Here's how much nitrosamine you can measure over the course of a day in someone eating ham or sausage. And here are 2 representative graphs of how much is flowing through the bodies of those eating vegetarian. In fact, you can take people who eat smoked or canned meat, put them on a vegetarian diet, and very quickly see a drop as their body starts detoxifying itself within a day or 2. Here's a chart of the effect of changing from a meat diet to a vegetarian diet on urinary nitrosamine levels, a reflection of what's flowing through their bloodstreams. Looking at 4 different carcinogens, you can see day 1 and 2, they're eating meat, then vegetarian days 3 through 5, and you can see the dramatic drop, though it doesn't drop as low as those on the control vegetarian diet. Presumably, though, a few more days eating vegetarian, and their bodies would be able to flush out the remainder. The level of nitrosamines in bacon is so high that these carcinogens have been discovered even in the vapors from fried bacon. You know the smell of frying bacon that everyone loves so much? Well, one of the more potent carcinogenic nitrosamines is in those fumes. You're breathing it in. In fact, if you're going to cook something like bacon and eggs, the barbecue people have the right idea. Do it outdoors in the fresh air. The amount of deposited particles deep into the lung of an individual indoors exceeded by up to 10 times the amount received by an individual at the same time period outdoors. Just don't run around or play frisbee or anything near the grill, as the number of deposited particles significantly increases with exercise, just because you're inhaling greater lung volumes. It's kind of the secondhand smoke of the meat world. What about tempeh bacon? Tempeh is probably the closest plant-based thing to cured meat. It's a fermented soybean product. Airborne mutagens produced by frying beef, pork, and a soy-based food. What do you think they found? Airborne cooking byproducts from frying burgers, bacon, and tempeh were collected, extracted, and tested for mutagenicity, the ability to damage and mutate DNA. The fumes generated by frying pork and beef were mutagenic, especially the bacon, found 15 times worse than the beef. But no mutagenicity was detected in fumes from frying tempeh burgers. The researchers suggest that this may explain both the increased risk of respiratory tract cancer among cooks, as well as the lower proportion of deaths from respiratory diseases and lung cancer among vegetarians. If plant-based antioxidants like vitamin C and vitamin E can block the formation of nitrosamines, why don't the bacon manufacturers of the world just add some vitamin C to their meat? They do. In fact, by law in the United States, bacon has to have antioxidants like vitamin C added to it to cut down on nitrosamine production. So what's the problem? The vitamin C does not work in the presence of fat. In fact, it looked like that it actually makes meat more carcinogenic, if you can believe it. In the presence of phytonutrients, such as vitamin C, nitrosamine production drops as much as 1,000-fold, or is completely blocked. In contrast, in the presence of fat, vitamin C has the opposite effect, increasing nitrosamine production 8-fold, 60-fold, 140-fold even. Instead of neutralizing the risks of nitrites, adding vitamin C to meat may make it worse. The presence of fat converts vitamin C from inhibiting to promoting acid nitrosamine production, for this kind of complicated reason which you can read about. So when meat industry commentators exclaim, pork is good for you, animal fat is good for you, cured meats assist the human body with cardiovascular health, they don't know what they're talking about. The natural source of nitrites are from the nitrates in vegetables, which have the phytonutrients, without the fat that Jekyll and hides them. The bottom line, our body wasn't designed to get its vegetables in the form of bacon. Why don't those carcinogenic nitrosamines form in our stomach from all the nitrites coming off our tongue? Because our body's not stupid and actively secretes vitamin C into our stomach juices to prevent that kind of thing from happening. That makes sense, right? Why would our body go out of its way to evolve this elaborate double-pass mechanism to produce lots of nitrite if it was harmful? As one group of researchers noted, if nitrite were indeed itself a carcinogen, we would be advised to avoid swallowing because saliva contains so much. So the way we are able to safely produce nitric acid from nitrites is by smuggling it into our bodies in safe nitrate plant form. Plants come pre-packaged with just what the body needs to keep their nitrates from becoming carcinogenic. The bottom line is that whopping doses of nitrates from vegetables is likely to improve athletic performance and blood pressure without increasing cancer risk, as long as it's done in the context of a healthy plant-based diet. As long as there's fat-free phytonutrients physically in our stomach for 3 or 4 hours after we nitrate load, the nitrites produced will zip through our system and feed our muscles and vessels with nitric oxide. And it doesn't take much. Like 20 milligrams of vitamin C is all you need in your stomach to block nitrosamine production. That's like 2 strawberries, a little stalk of broccoli, or a slice of bell pepper. Our bodies may have evolved getting as much as 600 milligrams of vitamin C a day. Right? If you're out cycling, green tea would probably be the most convenient. There isn't any vitamin C in beet juice, though, so just sipping beet juice all day is probably not the best route, though there may be other phytonutrients that would serve the purpose, something we still don't know. But a big arugula salad has as much nitrate as a cup of beet juice, and in addition, the requisite dose of vitamin C. Whole foods are always preferable. But if you do decide to juice your own beets, you should add some greens or something, so throughout the day you can maximize nitric acid production while minimizing any risk. Realizing that the link between meat and cancer is so strong, particularly processed meat, a new article in the journal Meat Science asked, should we become vegetarians, or can we make meat safer? There's a bunch of additives, for example, that can suppress the toxic effects of heme iron, the blood iron that's found in meat. These additives are still under study, but could provide an acceptable way to prevent colon cancer, because evidently avoiding meat is just out of the question. I mean, if the National Cancer Institute recommendations to reduce meat consumption were adhered to, sure, cancer incidence may be reduced, but farmers in the meat industry would suffer important economical problems.